y'all, and welcome back to another excellent and exciting episode of To the Saints.
Yes!
Where we are encouraging our brothers and sisters in Christ onward to fullness in Christ.
Yes.
So we have a great episode this week, but before we go into that, we'll do a little bit of house cleaning. Just to remember, our website is tothesaints.com. If you're new to this podcast, you can go there and listen to all of our episodes. We're in the 90s right now, and so you can start from the very beginning and listen to your heart's content. You can download them. There are several different platforms to listen to them on. That's for the new ones, and for those who have been listening for a while, we want to thank you for continuing to listen, and for all those who've supported with encouraging words as well. Also, you can follow us on Instagram.
Yeah.
Just look up To the Saints and you'll find us. Follow us, connect with us. And we do have a new YouTube channel with a few episodes already posted, and we'll have a link in a podcast at the bottom of our podcast so you can get to it as well. I'm Tyrone, part of the gang here, and there's several other people here too who are going to tell you who they are.
I'm Thomas.
I'm Bridget.
This is Andrew.
This is RC.
This is Carrie. And this is Allison.
The gang's all here.
Gang's all here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we have...
I just want to say, you said the YouTube thing.
Yeah.
In a few episodes. I don't know if people understand really how entailed it is to upload 90 some odd episodes.
Yeah, it takes some
YouTube.
time.
Yeah. We didn't start YouTube from the very beginning. Had
No.
we done that, I'm sure we'd have our 98th episode, 98 episodes on there. But we already had 90 something when we got started.
Yes.
It takes a little time to.
Yeah, it takes a little time. We're working hard on it, and subscribe to that. Also, that's another thing is subscribe to our newsletter where you can get updates about possible events that we're having, news that's occurring, and also you'll get updated
Weekly.
or alerted weekly when we have a new podcast that's released.
Yes.
Anything else we
No,
want to?
you cleaned house rather well.
Clean house, yes. Okay. On today's episode, we will be discussing an important topic, a topic that we all have experienced ourselves and want to be an encouragement to those who may be going through this right now. It's called the wilderness experience. And in previous episodes, specifically episodes 63 and 64, we talked about a group of believers called the Duns. This group of Jesus followers took the red pill, in quotes. That's an episode, by the way, episode 86. And they left the religious system because they desired a deeper experience of Christ. And so many of these followers who have responded to the Lord's nudging often either pass through or remain in something that we call metaphorically, or that is called metaphorically, the wilderness.
Right.
And so in this week's episode, we want to encourage those who may be in this place by honing in on what the wilderness is and it isn't, and as well as what can be learned while in this season and the perils of the wilderness as well. And so we're going to get right into that right now by kind of figuring out like what is the wilderness?
What is it? It's a good question.
Yeah. RC?
Yeah. Carrie?
Are we doing Ezra?
No. Only if we want.
Only if we want
Ezra
to.
2.
I liked her a little bit.
The Return.
Well, we would have to talk about the other one too, I think. So
Ezra 1.
Yeah. So okay, we'll go there then. Basically, a lot of believers are aware of the wilderness experience of the Israelites coming out of Egypt before going into Canaan land. And I think that's where most people's minds go when we talk about a wilderness experience. But the reality is that when the Israelites were also taken captive to Babylon, which often represents the religious system, metaphorically, coming out of that to go back to the promised land, they also had to go through a wilderness. There is this wilderness in between coming out of something that's not of the Lord's heart and mind, and going into something that is of the Lord's heart and mind, and that's the wilderness, right?
Yes.
Right.
Well done.
Yeah. It's a good. It sets the tone, of what we're actually talking about, and it isn't just a new thing.
Right.
It's something that it's one of the Lord's processes with all of his saints.
Yeah, so Israel experienced it physically and practically.
Right, but even
in the Old
individuals
Testament.
have experienced
Right,
it.
and we now
in the Old
experience
Testament.
that. That's true, yes.
Yeah, so it's individuals and a corporate, experience.
It can be
of-
corporate, yeah. And now we experience it spiritually.
Exactly. And so with this, one of the things to keep in mind when we talk about what is the wilderness, it's a Christ-given, tailor-made pathway for you. And what popped in my mind is we've been reading Hind's Feet on High Places. And even just reading today, I mean, he talks about the wilderness. And what I really liked, and hopefully I say this in the right way if I remember the details, but he was actually talking about that it was a rite of passage in such a way to go through it, because everybody who's ever gone through it, like in the Old Testament, it is a sign of royalty.
Oh, wow.
Like everybody else that has done this, it's just a rite of passage in a way. But even today, so he's taken the little Much Afraid on, up a little bit higher. Now she has to go even higher, and it requires her to have something she doesn't feel that she has to do it. And he did say there's this type of mountain, there's this type of mountain, and this type of mountain, but this is the mountain I've chosen for you. It's the mountain of injury. And it was her path that she needed to go on, because the other mountains didn't apply to her.
Right.
But this would be the thing that she needed to be able to know that it would transform her.
Right.
It would also give her faith as well as she walked the path. That increased her faith as in who Christ was and who she is and things like that. So it is a tailor-made course. It is the things that the Lord knows in our hearts that we are attached to, things that we can let go of, hurts that we have, or things, wrong thinking that we might have. Is in the wilderness, he uses that as an opportunity to deal with some of those things. So he'll tailor-make that for us.
Yes.
Yeah, I like how you said it's tailor-made.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know for me, it was a progression, and then I realized, I'm in the wilderness, because the Lord kind of sometimes just gives you like the next step, and so you take that next step, and it could be crossing the Red Sea, I guess, but the next step is like, okay, leave this system, okay, and then you're just kind of dependent on Him. So the wilderness is an intentionally dry place, because you're taking off these empty calories, these props maybe that you didn't realize were props. You just thought they were they were true, and then all of a sudden you realize, this wasn't really Christ. This was this other stuff, like fluff or just stuff that gets in the way. And it causes you to depend more on Christ, and it does feel like a desert, and you do look for these the oasis, the sweet times where you get fellowship with another believer, or you read something in a new way, and the Lord's opening your eyes to Scripture or to a new book, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. Christ is wonderful, and He is all sufficient. He can guide me through this time.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the wilderness. Do we have anything else to say about what the wilderness is?
I think some of that might come out in what we talk about in the purpose of the wilderness, too.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah.
Awesome. So the purpose of the wilderness then, which we've actually already touched a little bit on, but it is a time of preparation and even testing. Jesus himself even went through a wilderness experience. And I know that for myself, one of the times RC and I were in a wilderness experience as we were waiting to move to Florida and really experience body life, I kept being so concerned that we're going to get there and we're going to be so far behind everyone, because they're already there. They're already experiencing Christ in community. They're learning all this stuff and experiencing all this stuff, and we're going to be so far behind.
We're getting left behind, yep.
And when we finally got there, I realized that the Lord had been doing a lot of preparation in the wilderness.
Yes.
That we weren't as far behind as I thought. There are some things that you can only learn in community.
Yes.
That we could have never been prepared for in the wilderness.
Yeah.
But there were so many things I wasn't even aware of that the Lord was doing in the wilderness that was also preparing us for experiencing His life in community. And then the reality of testing, Andrew just mentioned how part of the wilderness is an intentionally dry place that causes you to really strip down to Christ alone. And that testing is, are you going to be satisfied with Christ alone? Like, are you going to let these things go? And so that you can move on into that fullness of the Lord.
Right.
Yeah, true. That's good stuff. So the purpose, another purpose of the wilderness is to move us towards God's ultimate intention, which really is Christ being central in all things, and the way of the cross being a way of life for us.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it brings us into desiring to be and being more ready to be an active participant in a kingdom community.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Particularly coming out of Babylon, where you've gone from being kind of a spectator to now being
Or too much of a leader.
Right. Sure, that too. Too much of a participant. So that's part of that wilderness experience, and either stripping away, going from that spectatorship to participantship, or over participation.
Yes.
I'm not cutting that out. I'm leaving that
Okay.
in.
Love it.
And to stripping away that urge to over participate, to actually sit back some. And the wilderness leads one. So the wilderness is, saints, a necessary season.
It is.
Yeah.
How long, we're going to talk about this later, but how long you stay there is up to you, really. Because, like, talking about the Israelites going out of Egypt into the Canaan land, the Lord just took them a few days to get there. But their own choices kept them in the wilderness for 40 years, a lot longer than what was originally intended there.
Right.
So, yes.
Okay, I never felt like I had a wilderness season. Like, I went straight from institutional church to organic church, but I rarely got anything out of institutional, sermons and stuff. So my trust was never in the system. My trust was in the Lord. And now that when I went to organic church, my trust wasn't in organic church. My trust is in the Lord. So, but I never had, as far as I discern, a wilderness experience in the traditional sense.
So when you think of wilderness experience, do you think of specifically like a time in between one experience of the Lord in church and another experience where you're on your own?
I think of when you're not part of a group.
Okay. But there are also, yes, it can physically look like that, but the reality is there's a season of spiritual dryness that is the wilderness. And you can still be completely active in institutional church or organic church, and go through a spiritual wilderness, where you're in a place of dryness. Churches themselves, I can't remember if this is on there, but like we can actually, as a church, go through a wilderness experience too, and we're obviously meeting, and actively participating as a community, but yet spiritually we're going through a wilderness or a dry season.
But you bring up a good point,
Yes.
Thomas, in that, again, the season of the wilderness varies for different people, and it may not have been a very long season, and you may not have identified it as, this is my wilderness.
Right.
It's not about, I have to have a season that I call the wilderness.
Yes.
It's okay, so the term wilderness is not what
Important.
the Lord uses. It's that season of a preparation, of a stripping, of a what have you, to bring into more fullness. And it leads to one of two things.
Yes.
Your season in this wilderness. It can either lead to life or to death. Either you go through the wilderness with the Lord and move on into the promised land, who is Jesus Christ, or you either stay in the wilderness, or you be like some people who want to go back to either Egypt or Babylon. And saints, there's only one thing that's life, and that's the land. Staying in the wilderness isn't life. Going back to old things isn't life. The life is the Lord, and either you move on with the Lord or you don't. And so the wilderness kind of brings you to a point where there is a decision to be made.
It's like a fork in the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either you move on and go on, cross the river, or you hang out where you are. And, you hear a lot of people say, "My bones are bleaching in the desert, or bleaching in the wilderness,"
Yeah.
And or you turn and go back.
Yeah.
They go back. Yeah.
I think kind of the significance that RC was talking about, and all of us, of course, in the wilderness is the nudgings of the Lord. He's the one who moved you from whatever season or place that is, spiritually or physically. He's the one who moved you on from that place, and all of these points in our lives in Him, He's the one moving us.
Right.
And as we are going,
Yeah.
we are learning to follow Him
Right.
and what He's wanting, and it ultimately brings us to an experience of Him that is not just us by ourselves. We'll
Right.
get to that a little bit later, but
Right.
that's at least that's my thoughts in regards to that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like even like a thing about you, Thomas, that experience may not have been between quote unquote institutional and organic church. That season may have been long before that, but that there was a season that the Lord had with you that moved you to where you trusted in Him alone. Does that make sense?
And like RC said, you don't necessarily have to recognize it. It's okay if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, recognize the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You better recognize.
You better.
Right. And us talking today, just because there's the one wilderness of coming out of one situation
Yeah.
to another, we are talking about a particular wilderness today.
Yes.
There are more wildernesses to have,
Yes.
like when the Lord, even when
Yeah.
you're in a
Mhm.
group,
Mm-hmm.
inwardly, that you feel like there's something happening, like the same type of feeling, like, oh, I felt this before. It feels like I've been in the wilderness, and you may very well may be. And, but the one we're talking about today is this particular one where it's leaving, the
Right.
institution heading
Coming out of the
into
duns, yeah, being the
more
duns,
of
mhm.
Christ
Yes.
and things like that. So I agree. I remember there was a sister in Gainesville that said, I don't think I ever had a wilderness experience. So yeah, there's going to be those that don't really have it, and maybe they can't call it that, but
Don't have it in this exact way.
Yes.
in this
Right.
exact way. But they have had something where they've had to walk through something similar.
But thanks
Right.
for bringing it
Yeah,
up.
Yes.
that's a really good point.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So, what are some things that can be experienced in the wilderness?
I don't know, Andrew. What are some things?
Well, thanks for asking.
Oh, you're welcome.
To begin with, we get to see Christ as all sufficient.
Yes.
The thing, the everything, the one.
Yes.
It's about Him.
Okay.
And I think about, when I go, this is related, but if I go, look at people who go hiking or go camping and they just take what they need because they're going for a short stay. You don't have to have an inflatable bed. It's nice, but
Yes, you do,
if you're
Andrew.
carrying everything like on your backpack, maybe that's not the extra weight you want to have. And so sometimes in this wilderness, it's like, okay, what are the essentials? Okay, it's me. Okay, Christ is leading me. Christ, what's Christ doing? And then just being open to following what Christ is doing and revealing to you.
Yeah. Some other things we can experience in the wilderness is journeying with Christ towards His fullness, which is His body.
Yeah.
And I can remember when, for me and Allison, when we had, we took the red pill, we had left the system, whatever you want to call it, and we started to kind of engulf ourselves, entrench ourselves in Christ-centered ministry. We were just like, yes. And our vision of Christ grew. And then there was this other aspect that we came into, which was Christ, His body.
Yes.
And we were like, yeah, that's His body. That's His church. And it wasn't just me and Allison learning about Jesus.
Right.
It was this greater vision that the Lord had that He was pushing us towards. And so that was something we learned, and it ultimately it moved us
Yeah.
to move. In our case, that's not in everybody's case, but in our case, to go out, to search out, to go on this journey with Him, to leave Babylon and go to this other city, to be a part of the building of this city.
Right.
And it's been a blast since. It's been some rough times, but this is a part. It's the Lord. He's never left us. He will
Yep.
never leave us, even in the times that are challenging. Yeah.
Amen.
And we also experience, the fun thing of being stripped of certain things, particularly of ourself. What does that mean, RC? Well, it means that like my ambitions, my ministry desires, I had within myself that desire to be a senior pastor or a lead pastor or the head pastor or whatever you want to call it.
Bishop.
I wanted to be the bishop of something. And what happens in the wilderness is part of that preparation to be in the land, be in the kingdom, is those selfish ambitions, those selfish desires to be stripped. Even if it was for the Lord. My thought was I wouldn't necessarily pastor the church for myself. It was obviously for the Lord, but in the wilderness, for me and for a lot of people, the process begins of being stripped of me, of myself. For me, I went from trying to be a pastor to being a priest unto the Lord with my fellow priests, this priesthood. For others, it's coming out of that self of, I got to learn to actually function a little more and be a priest with my fellow priests.
Yeah.
So,
related to that, it also begins the process of letting go of religious baggage. I know I experience this particularly with, what do I do on Sunday mornings now? And, feeling some guilt and other things and, the importance I placed on these, weekly times that I would go somewhere for an hour or whatever. You just start dealing with this.
Yep.
And I like how we're saying we're beginning the process because there's only so far that the wilderness takes it, and I think we'll get into that.
Yes.
But it does begin that process, and it's very helpful.
Yeah.
like with the self, I only know I have so much, but when I get into a body
Right.
of
You
believers,
just go a whole lot more.
yeah, they point out that I have a lot more self than I thought I had. In love, of course.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just indirectly pointed out.
Something
happened.
Somebody-
We're not going around
most of
putting
the
Yeah.
time
that
it's
self there.
indirectly.
Yeah, somebody's
and
not even aware
it's the
that,
Lord
that they're
through
doing
something
it.
happening. You're like, ooh, that's some self sitting there. Okay, Anyway, that's just fun.
It's just
I'm
fun.
sitting here thinking people going around. Anyway,
I'm touching you.
yeah, exactly.
I'm not touching you.
I'm not touching you. Also, the wilderness. As you progress on, you will start to become more desperate for Christ and His body like never before. I can remember our wilderness started in the institution when we came back from Africa, and we just didn't fit and all that stuff, and so it just kept progressively going and going. And then we found some people to meet with outside of the church when we finally came around to the idea. But then there was a certain sense of leaving them. Because the Lord said, nope, this isn't what I have for you, just to kind of keep going. I'm touching on kind of 2 points here. So the first one, the desperation, we had a brother come visit us from the Gainesville church. And while we were in Indiana, and we were like, well, we can't go anywhere until we sell our house. I mean,
You guys had already visited us at that point,
at
right?
least twice.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
the first time to see if that was it, and the second time was to do some job interviews. And it's like, well, we can't go until we sell our house, and this saint, it was the Lord. He's like, is that the only thing keeping you? We're like, yeah, okay. But the other thing that started in us too, because when we started to look at places to live, we were looking at houses we wanted, the types of houses we wanted to live in. We were going to buy,
Building a house.
We were build a
You
house.
wanted some land, some chickens.
And
Yes.
this whole process, and the desperation got so much, it got to where I don't care what I live in.
Didn't matter.
Get me there.
Right.
That's what the desperation did. It was like, I don't care what I have to do to get there. Let me strip, what I need to be able to get there. And it did, and then obviously doesn't happen for all, but within a month of moving there, our house had an offer, and it was
Right.
sold within 2 months of moving.
Yeah, it was an important season of regarding specifically the body of Christ, this idea of a community of believers being close together. I needed that wilderness time to be okay, first of all, with that idea, to accept it, I guess, and then to be okay with it, and then to grow to desire it and really, really
Yeah.
want it.
Yeah.
Because that was not going to happen the Allison before.
Right, I hear
know.
you, because I'm not like that
Yeah.
either. Anyway, so there's also this idea, the wilderness can also be a seasonal loneliness, where you feel like you can't connect to anyone. You
Yeah.
have these things that you're learning, you're seeing, you're like, there's no outlet for you. So you can inwardly feel this loneliness that nobody really understands what you're, happening and things like that. And as I was talking before, the Lord had taken us outside the church and then into a group. And then from that group, we were alone for a year with absolutely nothing, nobody around. And I was like, Lord, really? At least we had the group, and somebody to talk to and stuff like that. But
is there anyone? Yeah.
is there anyone?
Yeah.
Hello? Like, you keep knocking and nobody's there really. And it was like those resources, the oasis that would keep us going, like a little flag. It's okay, just keep going.
Yeah.
But you will experience a type of loneliness, and it's a deep loneliness. At least for me, it was not having anybody to talk to process through things I was learning.
Yeah, and I think we probably talk about other places, but for Carrie and I, Carrie was ready to drop it all, and I was kind of holding on because I was trying to find comfort in the wilderness. I was trying to build a little shack in the wilderness.
Learning new ways to cook manna
That's
and all
right.
that.
Yeah.
Making bricks.
Yes. And so, the Lord really dealt with some things in our marriage and our communication in the wilderness, and also things with our family. I guess in in the institution, it was easy to go into a place where the kids went one way, we went a different way, and then we didn't have a lot of communication about as a family, our spiritual well-being. And in this wilderness time, it seemed that for us kind of rose to the surface about the Lord's intention and how to communicate things with our children, what was happening, because we weren't going to a place on Sundays like their friends might have been.
Right.
But all these things were just things that for us the Lord was dealing with, and we had that, like RC mentioned, an opportunity to deal with it, or just kind of bury it, or or not, or go back, I guess.
Go back, yeah.
Another thing that the Lord does during this time, he really uses kind of develops a spiritual hunger and thirst and an appetite for him.
Yeah. Amen.
And an appetite that only he can quench.
Yes.
I know, I was thinking about that. When you go, I'm going to say diet, but a way of eating, and you try to cut out some things, like especially, I'm going to say sugar, because that's a big one. Most people, and their tolerance of sugar is really high.
Yeah.
But when you start cutting it back a lot, and then you start to eat something sweeter, you're like,
that's
whoa,
sweet.
that's really sweet. Like, you didn't know what the diet you were eating was not as healthy for you. I'm talking about in the spiritual or the institutional church. And then you actually got to taste the real diet.
Right.
Whoa.
And it's like, wow, that's really good. And you want more. Now you know what the real thing tastes like, or you're getting closer to what the real thing tastes like. And so it creates that hunger and thirst for more.
Yeah.
That's a really good analogy.
It is. I mean, we're surprised that our children aren't drawn to fruit. And it's because they're so used to a much higher level of
sugar,
sweetness that fruit doesn't cut it. But if you go through a season, because it takes time, it's not just doesn't just happen in an instant, but if you go through a season of significantly reducing the sugar in your diet, the next time you eat fruit, you're like, whoa, this is sweet.
Yes.
When before it wasn't.
No.
That's right.
Yeah.
When people say fruit as dessert, and I'm like,
I'm seriously.
what?
Covered in honey and whipped cream, right?
Yes, on top of ice cream.
I know. This is going to sound funny along those lines, because doing that was cutting out a lot of sugar. And I was like, I ate some broccoli one day, and I was like, I can taste the sugar in broccoli.
Right.
Lettuce.
Sugar in there.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
I didn't know it existed until
That's
I
very
cut it
spiritually
out.
discerning.
Yeah, she's very spiritual.
I was surprised. I was like, wow, this actually tastes sweet. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
But
So like fruit flavored stuff like Skittles doesn't count.
Fruit flavor. No, that,
No, that doesn't count.
yes.
But you start to crave the like, what do they call it? Yeah, clean diet, eating whole food. You start to
The natural
crave the
source.
food that we were actually created to eat.
That's good.
What'd you call it?
Whole food.
No, she said like
Clean eating
Clean eating?
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what they call it. Clean
Oh,
eating.
I thought you said yackling or something.
No,
Yeah,
clean
No, I
eating.
said clean.
You heard-
That's a different diet.
That's what I thought. What kind of diet is that?
Yackling eating. Yaks. Yaks.
Yeah.
They're high in fiber. apparently.
Oh, that's hilarious.
We've sort of touched on this point, but it definitely bears repeating.
Yes.
To keep in mind that this wilderness time is not meant to be permanent.
Right.
No.
It was never meant to be permanent. It's temporary. It's a time frame. The time frame can differ from person to person, and
Right.
it does. So don't stress out too much about, have I been here too long? Is it too short?
Right.
But it is, the purpose of the wilderness is not to build a shack
Yeah.
in the wilderness.
No.
Experiencing Christ while in this wilderness season cannot replace a group of saints, a body,
Yep.
people who are laying down their lives by, in, and to, and for Christ together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with that in mind, there are perils of remaining in the wilderness.
There are.
I mentioned earlier how it can lead to death.
Mhm.
First peril right off the bat is you miss out on the land.
Right.
You don't, if you stay in the wilderness, guess what? You're not going on into the land. And that's where the fruit, the grapes are as big as basketballs and whatever
Milk and
else.
honey.
Milk and honey, yeah. We talked about ice cream and stuff, but milk and honey's flowing in this land.
All that
you
was
know.
the fullness of God.
Yes, exactly.
Representation.
And another peril is you start to lose sight of the Lord's desire to be together,
Yes.
for a community,
Yes.
to be a part of saints learning to live by Christ's life. And I think related to that is, related to that is the enemy really does want us to be separate and alone and stay by ourselves. And the enemy is fine if we stay in the wilderness and just search and go in loops.
Keep us in that circle.
And stay in that wilderness in frustration or whatever. But that's because it keeps our focus off of Christ. So one of the perils of just staying there and being okay with the wilderness is that you lose the sight of togetherness,
Yep.
Yes.
community.
Which leads to limited or no fellowship with other believers.
Yeah.
When you lose sight of that, it could possibly already be limited
Yeah.
with the fellowship with other believers, but as you're staying in the wilderness for longer periods of time, then that becomes this present reality that eventually brings us to our next point.
Right. Or you just become comfortable being by yourself.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The wilderness, can become a comfortable place to be. And when you lose that sight.
And sometimes remaining in the wilderness too long and essentially that limited fellowship, that becoming comfortable with ourselves, we have created this ideal for community. It's actually become this thing. And so when the Lord does present that way into the promised land, when he does present an opportunity to be in community with other believers, we avoid it because it doesn't measure up to the ideal that we've created in our minds, being in this place by ourselves and becoming comfortable with ourselves, becoming comfortable by ourselves. It can be really easy to see the giants
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
in a group of humans.
Yeah.
And so
Which would be the distractions and
Absolutely.
the expectations not measuring up.
the expectation not measuring
Yes.
up.
Those are the giants.
Yes. And so then we don't go in.
Right.
Yep. We
Yeah.
stay. And then when we do that, we allow the books that we read and podcasts that we listen to and Facebook groups that we're a part of,
Yeah.
we allow that to become our experience,
Our
Yes.
community.
our community.
Yeah.
And we don't move on into
Yeah.
Real life, face to face.
body life.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of us know through various, relationships, people that went into the wilderness, and guess what? 3, 6, 10 years have passed, and they never really made aims to,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
not that that in of itself defines,
Sure.
sin. I mean, there are some
Oh,
people with the
no.
Lord, that's
Mhm.
their lot, but a lot of people stagnate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Stagnate. So,
Well, the reality is that it was for God's own purpose that he was bringing the Israelites into the promised land. And when they got hung up is when they saw, oh, him getting something is going to cost me something.
Yes.
And that's when we get tripped up.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, I remember going and visiting the saints in Gainesville. After a year, no, I guess it was about 8 months at this point, of really, really, really wanting to move there. And I had kind of built it up in my mind, right? I had this expectation of what it was going to be like, and it was going to be so wonderful, and all my dreams were going to be met. And then we went and spent a long weekend with them. And what was hilarious was that the couple that went with us, who weren't like quite as excited about moving there, came back like, it's time to go. We got to get there. And I came back like, wow. I remember sitting on the back porch of the family who we were staying at their house, and sitting on their back porch our last morning there, and was just kind of overwhelmed with the reality that this wasn't for me. That, like, I just saw that, Lord, you're asking us to come here, and I had built it up in my mind and was expecting all these things for me out of it, and what I'm realizing is that this is for you. And
Had to come to terms with
I had to
that.
come to terms with that. I did. He was
Come
like,
to
okay, are
grips.
you still willing to come? And it was a very different experience from then on out, honestly, because I remember driving from Oklahoma to Florida, following the moving truck, and the truth is, I wasn't that excited about it anymore. I was now doing it because I truly believed it was what the Lord was asking of us, but I wasn't that excited about it anymore. Now, I will say, I fell in love with the Lord and his people there, and I would
Yes.
not trade it for the world. It has been totally worth it.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
crossing
Being honest.
over is costly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people stay in the wilderness because they see that cost.
Yeah.
And they decide
it's not worth it.
they don't think it's worth it. Yep.
Yeah.
So hear this, saints. Those who are done with the institution and are now in the wilderness, this is not for you. It is for Christ.
Yes.
Yes.
This is
Say it again.
unto
Say it again.
the Lord's glory. This is
Yes.
unto Him.
Yes.
We are not priests unto each other.
No.
We are priests unto the Lord.
first.
And this comes as a shock to a lot of people when they come into the wilderness, because a lot of what can get started anyway in the institution is that discomfort with, well, this didn't really meeting my needs. I'm not getting fed right. This doesn't look right. Not for everybody. Some people really say, man, the Lord's not getting his thing in here, and so
Yeah, yeah.
there's got to be something else. But some people are coming out of the institution going, this just isn't for me. I haven't found the right one yet. And so they think, oh, there's this thing called organic church. Let me go try it. It might be for me. This isn't about organic church.
Yes.
No, and that's not that's the one of the mindsets the Lord will start to get rid of.
Yes.
Yes.
He will move you from what am I getting out of it to what is he getting out of it. That's
Yes.
one of the biggest things in the wilderness he'll
mystery
start
moving.
working on.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Getting
that
you.
it's that process of shifting from this is about because I want because I've had conversations with saints recently, and I hear this in them.
Yeah.
This is what the Lord has for me. This isn't about what the Lord has for you. This is about what the Lord has for himself and what he is after. It might be in you, but it's not about, well, what the Lord has for me is so I can do this and so I can do that. And no, this is about the Lord getting his expression on the earth through a body of people being built together into his house. You don't think so?
No, I was having a conversation in my head where someone may have said that, and you interpreted it in a way that it was very selfish. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, it's if someone says the words, "This is what the Lord wants for me," versus "This is what the Lord wants for Himself," in my mind, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. The behavior is the same.
It can be the same.
It can be the same.
I think it's just the heart behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a heart issue.
Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to say that, but evidently my facial expressions of my internal.
We pick up on it.
Yeah, you
We
you
can
give a lot
see
of
you.
you give a lot of nonverbal
Yeah.
expression.
Right.
Thomas
So
is
what
learning this of himself.
RC is speaking to that heart
Yes.
that is
Yeah.
concerned
Yes.
for getting
Yes.
their thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. This is
No, no,
my
I mean,
ministry.
yeah.
Yeah. I have to do this because the Lord's told me that I'm going to do this, so I have to do this.
Yeah.
For me, da 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 da. And that, I'm talking to the heart.
Yeah.
That's
definitely.
struggling.
And
with that.
so, and that's one of the big things that the Lord works on in the wilderness is our heart. He was after the heart of the Israelites going out of Egypt and into the Canaan land. And because their heart was hardened, like, there's these giants, I can't come in. He wasn't interested in having them enter his land with that kind of heart. So he gave them 40 years to work on it.
Or to die off.
Or to die.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, let the next
generation.
Basically,
that
he
will
gave
be-
a heart transplant to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving people with new hearts.
Yeah.
Let's get specific with that. Just quick. The 40 years is actually a judgment from the Lord on them because they wouldn't move into the
Exactly.
land.
Right.
They
Exactly.
were they were faithless and fearful. He gave them a doorway,
Yep.
and they were like, no.
Yep.
So he said, okay, so for every day you spent in the land spying it out, it's a year in the wilderness. And he was and also that was the settlement between him and Moses because he was going to kill all of them and
Right,
start
he
over
was.
with Moses.
Yep, he was.
And so
Not my God.
yeah, he was I'll just start over with you. And Moses, who is Christ, interceded and
Yes.
said, no, if you don't bring these people into the land, then all the other nations will think you're not able to do so.
Yep.
So it's a reflection on the Lord in a way when we say, no, we're not going to move to this door that you've opened to go on into the fullness of knowing you. He's like, no, I'm not having that.
Yeah.
What he's after, he's aggressive about it.
Yes.
Yes.
So I mean, he's not like stomping over us, pushing us over to do it. But there's a aggressiveness
He
to
won't
it.
relinquish
Where
his purpose.
he's not
Yeah,
going to
he's
relinquish his
passionate.
purpose. He's going to pursue it with eternal his passion,
Yes.
Right. That's
which
a
is
passion.
yeah.
It's not a great analogy, but it reminds me of the quote unquote alpha battle that I have with my dog from time to time. He thinks he's the alpha, and he struts his stuff and barks back or whatever. But when I exert the actual authority that I have over him, then he realizes, oh, I'm not the alpha after all. And so God's people, we get trained in so many different ways that we can kind of manipulate God or what have you. And so we start trying to flaunt our stuff. And then God exerts his authority, this judgment for the wilderness for 40 years. Oh, nope, I'm not the one in charge. I'm not God after all. He is.
Yeah.
We kind of got down a tangent on that. I think it was one that somebody needed to hear somewhere.
I feel like
feel
that
like-
was
yes.
really what was in all of our
Yes.
hearts when we were first talking about this idea.
Yes.
Is that we see so many believers stepping out of the institution saying that they want more for the
Several
Lord,
conversations.
but then they sit in the wilderness.
yeah.
And so it's that encouragement for A, how to allow the wilderness to do its job, but B, how to not stay in it when the
Yes.
Lord starts presenting
Yes.
the opportunity to leave.
Because it's temporary.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
It's a hotel.
My prayer for my life is whatever, Lord.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I want to be 90 and still willing to be like, Lord,
Yes.
I'll give everything to you.
Yes.
You know,
Amen.
like
Yes.
we've called
To
it
know
a
you.
sacrifice
Yes.
life. We
Yes.
will. How we live this life will reverberate literally for eternity.
Yes.
Yes.
Why would you? It's a bad investment to focus on yourself. You know.
Yes. Amen.
Yeah, we want to encourage the saints to one, when recognize where they're at as they're leaving the institution, they're in the wilderness. Recognize you're in the wilderness.
Have this conversation with the
And
Lord.
we're not interested in you getting the right verbiage, the right language, and trying to skip through the wilderness like quickly, the express lane, the carpool lane. Because it'll be detrimental in the end, because once you feel like you're out of it, then you feel like you actually almost like you're not as open to learning. So we really want you during this season to recognize where you're at and to deal with the Lord
Yeah.
and to learn
Yes.
from the Lord.
Yes.
So what's some advice that we can give while these saints remain in the wilderness?
Good question.
Good question. Well, I just talked about books and podcasts can become your experience if you remain in the wilderness. But we do encourage you to read books and listen to podcasts, because let this be the manna that moves you on towards the fullness and the actual food of the promised land.
Christ-centered.
Christ-centered, yes.
Yeah.
So, we encourage you to read Christ-centered books. I hadn't read so many Christ-centered books in the institution, I read like ministry-minded books or
Leadership.
leadership, or the Who Moved My Cheese or whatever that book was called.
Yeah,
and
him and Ha.
and the effective whatever, or the
Leadership.
habits of so many of effective people, or whatever.
Spiritual disciplines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but to actually read books that point you to Christ
And his purpose.
and His purpose,
His purpose.
that this is for Him, unto Him, that'll start shifting your mindset in a hurry.
One place to start could be our podcast number 71, episode
Yes.
71, where we talk about our influences.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Those are
Yes.
some really good starts.
Well, that's good, because that leads into my next thing, Allison, which was listen to Christ-centered podcasts,
Ooh.
such as Andrew's favorite podcast.
Yes. Do the Saints
Yes.
every week. Can't wait.
And so a good one there, like Allison said, is episode
71.
71. Our
That's a good
influences, our
one.
resources. And that was one of Andrew's favorites.
It was.
Yeah, and just, you can simply talk to the Lord, pray, say, Lord, my desire is to have this wilderness experience be what you want it to be, and
Yes.
to be open and
Yeah.
and ready and willing when you open that door. Please open that door to be a part
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
a
that-
kingdom community.
And I was going to add that too. Like, if somebody's struggling with the fact of even having a willing heart, just talk to the Lord about it. Pray about
Yes.
it. He knows that.
Yes.
Even if
And
you're
he's
fearful.
so-
Yeah.
Or fearful
Yeah.
or whatever. I mean, just have these open and real conversations with them, and hey, I really don't feel like I want to.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay,
I
but
can handle that.
but I can handle that, and I can be your willingness for you. And let's do it together.
Yep.
You're not alone.
Right.
I like what Allison said about the willing heart.
Yes.
Because I know that there's a lot of saints out there with open hearts. And so the Lord, who are in the wilderness and have been in the wilderness for a while, who think that they, or say they have an open heart, they tell the Lord,
Yeah.
Lord, whatever, I have this open heart for you. And so the Lord will present them opportunities to either move or have another group, present a group in their city, like, hey, there's saints who are meeting. Oh, but yet they get to there and they realize that
They're not as willing.
they're not as willing
Yeah.
as they thought they might have been. And so that willing heart that's good.
The Lord's big enough to handle it. I feel like that's probably the real experience of everyone. When you actually come into face-to-face community and you start meeting together with other believers that rub you the wrong way, and you start realizing, wasn't quite as willing as I thought I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the prayer for a door to be open, we prayed for the door to be open in Seattle, in Tacoma.
Yeah, right.
And then we got in contact, and the Lord opened the door.
Yep.
When we found out what the door was, we were like, oh, that door.
Yeah.
And a year passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
See,
Exactly.
For us to
Right.
adjust to that door.
Yep.
Yep.
And then he developed and moved in us
Yes.
to where that door became a door for us,
Yes.
and that we moved in for him.
Yes.
So,
Amen.
and that
Exactly.
was is he worthy? That was the question he posed to us. Am I worthy?
Yep.
Am I worth everything to you?
Right.
And the resounding answer at that point was, yeah. Then we got into body life, and that question was asked again.
Had to answer it again,
We had
didn't
to
we?
answer it again.
Yep.
And we had to answer. I answered it yesterday.
Right? Yep.
Some more advice that we have is for you to seek out other saints who may be interested in connecting around Christ.
Yes.
This could be people that are in your area. There's things on social media you can connect with other people. We're not talking about having these spiritual or religious debates with
No.
people
Yeah.
online or getting caught up in some of those things, but truly connecting with other people, reaching out to them. We mentioned people on the podcast quite a bit that have influenced us. John Sens, different people, they have conferences from time to time. Make efforts to attend some of those conferences where you can connect to other people. And we'd love to help you connect with other people as well.
Visit some churches.
yeah.
We have several that you could go see.
Yeah, there's groups
Connect.
that we're aware of, and individuals that we know in
Yep.
different areas. There might be people in your area that you're not aware of. just reach out to us. Go to our website, tothesaints.com, and there's a contact page. Let us know where you're at, and we will make an effort to try to connect people with you, or as we're aware of other groups that are
We'll
close.
keep you in mind.
And when we say close, Saints, it may not be 10 or
next block
15
over.
minutes. I mean,
No.
it'd be wonderful if it is, but unfortunately, sometimes it is,
Yeah.
45 minutes, hour, possibly away.
3, 6.
It could be longer. It could, as we're talking about that, the Lord may move people in your area, or He may be asking you to go to another area. But we certainly want to encourage you in that, connecting with other people.
Yes.
And if there is an opportunity for you to not go through the wilderness alone, but to possibly go through it with another person or another family, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And, definitely a plus. But always remember to cling to the Lord only and always.
Yes. Right.
He-
Don't cling
he
to the
is-
other saints and
Right.
expect them to help get you through the wilderness.
I mean, we can rely on one another.
Yeah.
That's a part of,
Yeah.
of life in the Lord. But it's really the Lord that we're ultimately clinging to in our
Yes.
brothers and sisters. So,
Right. Yep. They can help lead you to water, but they can't make you drink.
yeah.
That's true.
It's
Yeah.
true. Well, all right. We kind of got into it there towards the end, didn't we?
Yeah.
That's good, though. All right. The wilderness. Saints, if you're done with the institution, done with Babylon, if you will, I'm sure there's a podcast coming up sometime where we'll actually talk about, when we say things like Egypt and Babylon, what we're talking about in a little more detail. Anyway, if you're done with that and you're in a wilderness, keep going.
Yeah, just
Don't stay there.
Just keep swimming.
That's what
just
popped in
keep
my head.
swimming.
Follow the life.
Yes.
Even though you can't swim
Press
in the
into
desert.
Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can swim in sand.
You can swim in Christ.
Oh, yes. We just really, I personally, and I think all of us really hope this is encouraging.
Yes.
And also admonishing as well
Yes.
to our saints to do what we just said, press into Christ,
Yeah.
keep going on. And the Lord's got it,
Yep.
although we can't see it every possible way. He has it all under control. It's His vision, and He will accomplish it however that sees fit. We just submit to that, okay?
Yes.
You're welcome. Once again, reminder, go to our website, tothesaints.com.
Yep.
Listen to previous episodes. Subscribe to our podcast. Subscribe to our newsletter podcast, however we're saying it.
We'd love to hear what you have to say about your wilderness experience, things you're going through, so leave a comment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's at tothesaintsradio@gmail.com. You can contact us as well as just leave a comment on our website. Andrew will answer any of your comments.
Yes.
Every one of them, 24 hours a day, 7 days. We love you dearly. This is Tyrone.
This is Thomas.
This is Bridget.
This is Andrew.
This is RC.
This is Carrie.
This is Allison.
Nice.
Threw you off, didn't we?